It is 3 o'clock, Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. I will now call the Diversion Authority Land Management Committee to order. If you need to mute yourself, please do. I know we've got quite a bit of feedback here. And could we take a roll call, please?
Mrs. Shirley.
I am here.
Mayor Judd. Mr. Grubb.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Borboom.
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson. Mr. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Breitling. Ms. Mongeau. Mrs. Preston. Mr. Zimmerman.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. At this time, we have an agenda before you. Are there any additions or changes to that agenda? Eric, are we good?
I think the agenda is good. However, Joel is on, I believe. We've been working on some supplemental materials related to item 5 on the agenda. And so we'll probably do a screen share with the group when that item comes up.
Okay, great. Thank you. And if people can do the screen share throughout the meeting when it's possible, I appreciate that as well. So let's move on to item number 3, approval of the October 21st minutes. Are there any changes, corrections to those minutes, or I would ask for a motion to approve?
This is Jenny Marshall. I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Olson, second.
Thank you very much. All those opposed, say aye. And the motion carries. Let's talk about the property acquisition status report. Eric.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sherling and committee members. In your packet, starting on page 7, which I believe, Tammy, if you're running this show, thank you for that. Everybody can follow along. I think last month I indicated that I was anticipating the chart here in front of you would look much more Christmas-like with lots of reds and greens. As you can see, there are more reds on the map this month, which I guess that's a maybe mixed sign. That means that we have had to file a condemnation action on those properties. We are continuing to negotiate on those, but it does indicate that we did file that quick take action. And so you can see along the southern embankment, Reach 1, there's a group of parcels that are flagged as red, a few of them along I-29, and then some parcels along the channel as well. In addition to that, there's still quite a few number of blue parcels, blue shaded parcels along the channel. Those are parcels that, again, we're continuing to negotiate on all these. We have been through all of the quick take process on nearly all of the parcels for the channel. And so I think we're just waiting for some of the paperwork to catch up with those actions. So anyway, making more progress. You can see on the legend on the left side, the acquired status, we're up to 485. That's quite a significant jump from last month. And some of the reasoning for that is, one, we're making progress. But secondly, we have gone through and done some of the parcel splits where, again, we may have acquired a full parcel. And now we've split that into 2 parts and we own both of those. They're just separated from the full parcel. And so it sort of artificially buoys up the number. There'll be discussion later on in the agenda about asset lands, which that fits into. So anyway, just wanted to share that. You can also see on the red in the legend there on the left side, the red colored parcels we're up to 39 at the date of this report was produced a week or so ago. And again, that's a number that unfortunately is going to grow, but we've followed all the statutory steps, been through the county commission, as many of you know, a few different times. And so we're proceeding down that path. The next page, Tammy, if you can just scroll down, usual status of activity here. This is for the environmental monitoring easements. I think a month or two ago, we inserted this new map just to highlight those parcels. The appraisals are just coming back now on those easements, and so we'll be working to follow our action plan for that process and making offers here shortly after the new year. That continues to go well. And then the remaining pages just drill down into each of these sections individually. I guess you can see individual progress on those areas, all color coded to match that overall front sheet. So I won't, I guess, bore you with any more of those details, but certainly happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. I have a question for Chris McShane. I see he's on the line. We did have quite a flurry of activity before the county commission up until a month ago or so. I'm just wondering, how long does it take from those meetings until we get actual possession, and have we resolved any of those? Gee, we must have had 20 or 30 different people go through.
Commissioner Schmerling, it's a great question, and it all depends on the specific parcel. For the most part, it can happen very quickly if there's not any possibility of negotiations, and if there's not any title problems. So we have not necessarily filed the next day on all of them because many of them there is the opportunity for negotiation, and we have negotiated at least a half a dozen landowners, I would say, since the county commission approved the use of quick take and before we actually filed. And then there's also some where we've had some title problems. So our focus has been on Southern Embankment Reach 1 and then I-29. All the eminent domain actions on both of those reaches have been completed, and we are and we've deposited. And now our focus next is on the channel. I think we have all but 2 of the landowners for the channel that we have permission from the county commission to move forward on, and all of those complaints are trickling into my office for final review, and we should have all of those filed within the next week to 10 days here.
And so once you get that filed, then we have access to the land. Is that how it works?
It's actually once we deposit the funds. So the clerk of court in Cass County won't accept funds until after we have a court number to be associated with where those funds should go. So we file an action, we get a judge assigned and a court number assigned, and then at that point we are attempting to serve the action upon the landowners so that they know that there's something going on, because that service of process needs to be personal service. And then after the personal service is completed, then we deposit the funds with the clerk of court, and the clerk just sends out certified mail, not return receipt requested, just a regular certified mailing saying that X number of funds have been deposited with the clerk of court. And what we were running into on the front end is people were getting this one-page notice from the clerk before they knew what was going on, and there was a lot of confusion with that. So we're trying to serve first, then deposit, which then triggers the clerk to send their page or 2 document. And as soon as we deposit, we have access to the property and can move forward with contracting and whatever use of the property is necessary for the project.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that explanation. Who else has questions for either Eric or Chris? Okay, then go ahead and continue, Eric.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would just maybe follow up, I think you asked a question of, after we've been through the county process, have we reached an agreement with any of these property owners? Yes, we have. I believe we've been through the county and asked the county to approve roughly 50 different actions over the last 8 meetings. And of those 50, we've reached a settlement agreement on roughly 10 of them. And so it's not all of them, of course, but I think that's still a good number and sort of demonstrates that we are trying to continue negotiating as we move through those processes.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I don't have any more planned comments on the report here, but again, happy to answer questions if there are.
Okay, well then let's move on to item 5, the environmental monitoring easement action plan. And Joel's going to join you on this one.
I think this is the policy discussion regarding disposal of asset lands. Is that right, what you have on your agenda?
No, I have environmental monitoring easement action.
Okay, I think we may have an agenda issue. Tammy is showing the agenda that I guess that's the version that I have, so I apologize, Mary.
Sorry, I may have grabbed the wrong one.
Sure.
And I did. I can see that now.
Okay.
Okay, let's go with your agenda.
Joel, do you want to start on this?
Yeah, I'll kick us off here. And Eric's been involved in some of the draft policy creation discussions as well. So Eric, feel free to jump in where appropriate. I wanted to bring a discussion before the Lands Committee today due to the increasing number of interested entities, whether political subdivisions, nonprofits, private landowners that are interested in our asset lands or our excess property that we've purchased as a result of the project. And we have in the past dealt with the issue of the excess lands through the mitigation plan. The mitigation plan does provide an outline of kind of steps we would go through. Ultimately, however, I think there's a lot of maybe guesswork that could be taken into account. And I really want to root that out. I want the Land Committee to really feel comfortable with how we're treating the excess land, how we manage it, and how we sell or dispose of that property if necessary. And so I know this is the first time the Land Committee is seeing this. This is a draft policy that Mr. Shockley, Martin Nicholson, Eric Dodds, and myself worked on over the course of the past month. And we're not expecting the Land Committee to take action on this, but we are just maybe previewing it for the first time and raising the issue that what we're really looking for here is some policy guidelines on how we treat the excess land that's been acquired. And so maybe I'll just step through this very quickly. Certainly would hope that the Land Committee could take this back, maybe digest it over the course of the next month. I'd certainly be open, as well as Eric Dodds or John Shockley, to have any additional discussions concerning the policy. The first part of the policy is really just introductions, talks about why we've acquired excess land and how that applies to what our ultimate prerogative is for flood protection, and how the JPA kind of defines the member entity use and acquisition of excess land. If we want to scroll down here.
Yep.
And I think we can skip the definition portion.
Okay.
And let's just get into the roles and responsibilities there. So the way we have it set up right now, member entities have the responsibility to acquire and make available property for the completion of the comprehensive project. However, through the acquisition of that property, we fully anticipated that the member entities would in some cases acquire more land than is necessary for the construction of the project. And so really, this policy deals with what do we do with that excess land, and how do we dispose of that in a fair and equitable manner, given that we've purchased this property using taxpayer funds. So as we get into the key principles, I just want to have a couple of things that we as staff kind of thought were important as we move forward. Certainly up for debate and discussion by the land committee. The first one under 4.1 is land sold via public sale. So the staff felt that if we were going to dispose of land, that it should be put on the private market or the public market for sale to anybody, including a public entity that might wish to acquire the land, or a private landowner that would wish to make a bid or an offer on the property. This would give, I believe, the member entities and in turn the diversion authority, full market value for the sale of that property, which I believe is in the best interest of the taxpayers. The second item, 4.2, is refrain from selling land at a loss. And so what we're proposing here is that the authority and the member entity's intent is that the excess land should not be sold at a loss. And so that we should manage the land and dispose of it under a value-added proposal to ultimately, refrain from taking a loss on the land. Now, that may or may not always be, clearly evident. I think if you take a square parcel and make it into an obtuse parcel, you've certainly affected the value of the land. So there's a lot of nuances that can be taken into account here. But in general, we're not just giving this land away. Our intent is to manage the property, and ultimately, if it's decided to dispose of the property, that we're disposing of it at full market value and moving forward. Item number 4.3 is the preference to sell farmland to adjacent property owners. And so I think we all agree that we've greatly impacted the agricultural neighborhoods adjacent to the project. We've taken land that has been farmland and turned it into the diversion project. And so we've taken that out of the ag market in perpetuity. And so, our preference or our recommendation would be to approach adjacent landowners first. If they're interested in purchasing the excess farmland, we would negotiate a market value proposal and try to negotiate a deal. If that was not, if that was something we were unable to come to terms with, we would then move that to an open public auction or list that property for sale on the open market. Item 4.4 is the taxable status of the parcel. And so it would be the diversion authority, and we believe the member entities prerogative that they would want to keep the parcel taxable for the foreseeable future. Now, we may not be able to control that if another public entity were to purchase it at a market value and use the property for some sort of public purpose that would make it non-taxable. Of course, we would not have the ability to control that, but I think making a statement here that we would prefer the excess lands to remain taxable while we own it, and we would prefer to see that in perpetuity is a pretty strong statement. Item number 4.5 would be the option to hold certain land long-term. And we've really put this into play due to the excess land that the diversion authority or the member entities hold in the upstream mitigation area. And there's a lot of nuances to this. One is a risk perspective. We do know that we've increased the risk of certain parcels adjacent to the southern embankment, and those parcels will have a higher risk of triggering a prevent plant or a summertime crop loss through our prevent plant and summertime crop loss programs in perpetuity, along with some nuances as far as development land prices paid for ag land that ultimately will be ag land in perpetuity once the project is complete, and the flowage easement price paid for that in some cases is going to be far greater than what the value of the property is going to be after the project is in operation. So we've come across a couple of instances and scenarios where it really does make sense for the member entity to hold on to the property long term in a risk mitigation aspect for the diversion authority, and how that interplays with our insurance programs. And so we thought we would recommend a provision within this policy to handle that. That's kind of the high level overview. I don't know, Eric, if you have any additional comments or refinements you'd want to add to that. And then I'd certainly look for some discussion on this and some guidance moving forward.
Yeah, I think you captured it real well, Joel. Nothing real substantial to add from my standpoint. I would just note in the committee packet that hopefully you all received, there is a set of maps showing the asset lands that we own as of now. And you can see that there's a growing inventory of those. And so I think that was one of the other reasons why we prompted a lot of this discussion here, is that, frankly, we're amassing quite a bit of asset land, and next year we will be turning a whole bunch of the project land over to the developer, and then we have these remnant pieces that we need to sort through how we want to handle.
Well, thank you. This is really an important conversation, and it's important to have now as things are ramping up more. One of the questions I have, or a couple of questions, is do you put a minimum bid in there when we auction off property?
So I can comment about the horse barn auction, and that's one, if you recall, a month or two ago that we brought a recommendation forward through the committees to sell off the horse barn in northern Richland County, because it was determined after the Clomer model that we don't need to keep the horse barn, or we don't need to mitigate it. So in that situation, I think we're generally following the policy that's laid out in front of you here. We've had those discussions about minimum values with some members of the joint board. We've talked to Pfeiffer's as an auctioneer helping us through that sale. They've provided some feedback on what the building might be worth on a market value standpoint. And so we have talked to the joint board about establishing a minimum, have not made those discussions public. Of course, we're trying to let the public move forward with an open bidding environment. So. Okay.
My second question would be, and maybe this goes back to Joel, in your policies, do you address leasing these lands? I know we do have some of this property leased out, and it's productive farmland, and we're not in the business of farming. I'd rather have farmers farming, but if it makes sense for us to hang on to land until the dust has settled, if you will, and figure out what the most appropriate way to dispose of this land is, how are we addressing those leases?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I was hoping that somebody would raise that issue. So I think in general, in the spirit of this draft policy, and we could add some more refinements in here directly concerning leases, but in the spirit of this policy, I think the recommended option would be to offer land leases at market rate. Now, I know in some discussions, with members of the CAS Joint Board, I think they are going through a process right now of negotiating land leases with producers that were on the land prior to the Cass Joint Board acquiring it, and trying to have an effort to keep those same producers producing on that property. So there's some potential policy issue here that we could use some guidance on that we don't necessarily have at the moment. I guess from an extreme standpoint, I mean, do we want to treat this as every year we're throwing these land leases out to the market and trying to get top dollar for our land leases, or obviously being cognizant of the impacts that we're having with the project? Are we okay with negotiating land leases with the current producers and trying to keep them on the properties that they were producing on prior to us having an impact on them? And so I guess I'd maybe throw it back to the committee for maybe a candid discussion on that to help us to make sure that we're embracing that concept in this policy.
Thank you. Member?
Madam Chair.
Yes, please. Is that Roger?
Hi, this is Roger. Yes. I look at the impact that we are having to the farmers that are either selling their land or being displaced here when we need the land. And I look at trying to keep them on the land. And if it isn't the top dollar, I think it's an adjustment time for them to find other land to rent, other land to buy. And I think we should do everything we can to keep that producer who's tilling that land on the land if he wants to rent it. Now, it might mean that we don't get the exact top dollar, but I look at that as really mitigation to help him adjust to the impact that we're putting on his farm. So I would not be in favor of just throwing it to the public for bidding on this land, unless it's somebody that doesn't want to rent the land, wants to sell it and just be done with it. That's a different thing. But if, I don't think we should disrupt the operation any more than we are doing by taking land to auction. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. So that would be similar to how we're treating adjacent landowners, as having the first right basically to lease before anybody else. So you would work with that leasee to come up with a fair price.
Madam Chair.
And Piper's, really has Piper's has a pretty good handle on what the cash rents are in the area, and they've been doing the rent management for us. So, and they have made some adjustments when they felt it was too low. They've gone from cash share, or not cash share, but a minimum rent to a straight cash rent, I think, on all of them now. So I think they're doing a nice job of keeping up with the average rents in the area.
Thank you. Jenny Manjo, is that you?
Yeah, I also agree with Roger. I feel that to limit the local pain that's put on by losing that land, I think the more we can do to work with the current rentor or the local renter, the better. I just really feel that that's the important piece that we need to continue to foster. The second piece on the asset land is, I know that some of the asset lands were things that we had purchased before the current project, and so some of them people had sold before that. The only thing I would maybe add would be if the person that we purchased it from wants it back. I know that that's probably a small amount, but I know early on, people that may have sold out, I think we should probably offer it back to them first.
Say, good comment, Jenny. Eric here. Mary, if I may,
Please.
there are, as Jenny pointed out, there are a handful of parcels that we did acquire. For example, the organic farmland in Minnesota that was purchased from a willing seller under Plan A, and now those 2 quarter sections are not impacted. Those were purchased from a trust, and that arrangement. In other situations, we do have a right of first offer with the former owner, and so I think at a minimum, we'll need to work within the right of first offer arrangements that we're committed to. But as a policy, I guess that's something that we'd certainly take your direction if as a policy on any sale, we need to go back to the former tenant as an option. I guess that could be something we consider.
Do you include that in the purchase agreement at times, or is that usual?
I don't know if John is on, but I know at the last legislative session in North Dakota, there was quite a bit of discussion around this topic, and the legislators really asked us to include a right of first offer type arrangement in our purchase agreements, or not necessarily in the purchase agreement, but at least make sure that the seller was aware of that arrangement. And so we are making that provision available to anybody who is selling. And not everybody is interested. Some people are ready to take the cash and forget about their former land, but some people have asked to put that right of first offer in their purchase agreement.
Well, I don't know why we wouldn't. It shouldn't be an issue going forward anyway. I mean, we know what we need now, correct? So it should be a moot point moving forward, I think. But we should have a policy in place for it at any rate. Just, a lot of us won't be around a few years down the road. And I think it's important to have these policies written down for reference. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I guess just to pile onto that, just like, many of us might not be around forever, many of the former landowners or sellers aren't going to be around forever. And in some situations, it's really straightforward where, one person owns the land and we buy it as a single transaction. In other situations, there's a trust and there's, 10 or 12 or 20 remainder men that have some stake of ownership. And so selling back to that type of arrangement could be really complicated. And so I'd prefer if the policy guidance gives us the freedom to work within those ownership structures and not be overburdened by having to get 20 remainder men to sign off on getting a chunk of land, a triangle back, or that sort of thing.
Well, I'm sure there's a way you could work it, and it probably shouldn't go in perpetuity. I mean, it's 20 years down the road, not, but if something happens, within a reasonable period of time and we don't need the property, then,
sorry to keep interrupting, but if I recall right, the legislature wanted us to add, I believe it was a 5-year provision for the right of first offer.
I think they've had some experience. Nathan Borboom's here, and maybe Bob Zimmerman probably has the same experience in town in purchasing property. If they've ever, seems to me I've had a conversation with one of them about this very topic. I don't know if they want to chime in.
Sure. This is Bob. I can say that I can confirm that we have had that experience, mostly with small remnant pieces of property that were flood protected, that really weren't of any value but to the adjacent property owner. And so we've done a little bit of that. But I'm glad you asked because I did have a question. For Joel and Eric, I guess, just trying to understand what the vision is to get to a final policy and then what are you thinking about in terms of actually putting property out there for somebody to acquire?
Yeah, that's a good question, Bob, and I think this is just the first step of many of getting this kind of taken care of. You know, we continue to see a mounting amount of land. I think we're almost, Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're over $20 million right now in asset properties or excess lands. And the more lands that we acquire, you know, the more interest there is from different parties to purchase the property or do something with the property. And so that, you know, now that we know the extents of the right of way for the diversion channel, we're getting closer to having complete clarity on the right of way for the core portions. You know, that'll occur in pieces, but in general, I think we feel very comfortable that we know where that line is going to be between what is going to be public land in perpetuity and what we could consider as asset land or excess land that was purchased. You know, as we move forward this next year with the closing of the developer agreement, we're going to have a lot of need to have cash available. And so, you know, with $20 million kind of tied up in property, you know, at what point do we start to sell that back to free up that cash for the construction needs? And those are all the questions that are kind of circulating right now. You know, a number of issues have come up that I just felt like I need to get some more policy guidance from the land committee here before we start moving forward with any action. So that's, I would like to see us get a policy in place as quick as possible, because I think there are some issues that are going to come up that a nice, robust policy would prevent maybe misunderstanding or miscommunication between all the different parties that are involved, and then provide clarity and direction for the diversion authority, ultimately to our member entities for dealing with the extra land.
And so you plan on taking, once we've flushed this out a bit, you plan on taking this to the full DA board, is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner Schilling.
And will this be going to the finance committee for anything?
I did intend to bring this up at the finance committee today, just given, you know, our financial plan for the upcoming years, and, you know, $20 million is starting to be a pretty big amount of money to deal with here. You know, we need to somehow account for how we're going to incorporate that into our budgets and our financial plan as we move forward. And obviously, you know, we have a lot of unknowns as far as the cash that's going to be coming into the program over the next few years. A lot of it has to do with what the state of North Dakota does. Obviously, you know, we have some indications of what that may be, but we also need to have contingency plans in place for a variety of different circumstances that could be thrown at us. And you know, given that the high value of these asset lands, you know, I do feel it should be discussed at finance as well, from the fiscal side of things of how we're managing these lands. So.
Well, from my standpoint, you know, I just feel like this is taxpayer lands and we need the cash. And so we, you know, we need to very carefully handle how we dispose of this property. We shouldn't be in the business of farming it if there's somebody else that is interested in it. But on the other hand, we are producing income on some of it right now. So there is a cash flow coming in. And so, that's a good thing until we make some final decisions on this policy. But I really appreciate you producers there. If you've got input, to please bring it back to the next meeting or bring it to myself or Joel. And those of you that have had prior experience with this in other property acquisitions, this is probably one of the more important policies that we've looked at in quite some time. So I want to make sure that we get this right and move that recommendation on to the DA. And we'll need to do that in fairly short order, I think, because we are starting to get inquiries from a variety of people that think that might be kind of cool to own some land in Cass County.
Yeah.
Mary, this is Roger.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Joel.
Go ahead.
Joel, I think it's your 4.3, 4.2, 4.3, where it talks about adjacent land owner maybe having the possibility to purchase the land or being notified anyway. I'm wondering, the joint board has an offer on that we'll be looking at tomorrow at our meeting, and it's a landowner that wants to trade for the land right next to his land. It's adjacent to his land, and he's willing to do that to stop the eminent domain process. To it looks like we would cut costs to do that, and I'm wondering if that could fall under that 4.3.
Yeah, that was the intent, Roger, is to deal with situations like that as well. I mean, I think for that individual issue, if the Cass Joint Board felt that the value of the existing property was similar to the market value of the property that you were going to basically trade, it would just take the place of a cash offer, and that sort of a transaction would certainly fall under 4.3. And I think that's where the idea around 4.3 kind of came into play, is that if there was an ability to keep a current producer's operations concentrated around where their existing operations are, that we could potentially offset the purchase of some of their property with maybe the trade or the sale of a nearby parcel that would compensate and keep their operations aggregate in a certain area.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, we have quite a few other items we need to move on here. Is there anything else, Joel, that you needed to add to this?
That's all I have on that item, Madam Chair. I guess the only thing that can come to mind is just when we sell these properties. I know there's some properties that are being viewed by public entities for some other public purpose in the future. I don't know if it's necessarily the responsibility of the Cass Joint Board or the Diversion to continue to hold on to that. And so, as we move through that, I think notification of those public entities is warranted. So if the adjacent landowners don't want to purchase it, maybe then, according to our mitigation plan, we look, is there another public good for that piece of property, and then offer it to the public entity at a fair market value. And so I think there'll be a number of those discussions coming up over the course of the next year. Just wanted to make you aware.
Okay, and so we'll be hearing about this again next month?
That's correct.
Okay, and Commissioner Brightline, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just that I've been on I got on late, and I wanted to make sure that you acknowledged my attending the meeting.
Great, welcome. Okay, then let's move on to item 6, the update on the outreach to upstream property owners.
Sure. I think the rest of these items can go quickly, and so I know we're getting short on time, so I'll try to breeze through a few of these, but certainly interrupt me if you have questions or comments. Wanted the group to just be aware. I think you probably remember back in mid-October, we did send a pretty significant outreach packet to hundreds of landowners upstream. Over the last few months, we've been getting calls and questions and feedback, both in our office, primarily through the land agents, but also through the diversion authority offices as well. And so I think that's going well. This month, in fact, tomorrow, we are asking both the Cass County Joint Board and the MCCJPA Board to approve task orders with different appraisal firms. Those appraisal firms are being asked to appraise the structures, so homes, farmsteads, commercial properties in the upstream area. And so that's consistent with what we had told people back in October, is that we were going to be doing appraisal work starting this winter. So we're following through with that commitment. And that means that those appraisers will likely be contacting property owners probably after the first of the year, setting up inspection visits, sort of doing that part of the process. So I wanted the group to be aware that that activity is happening and continues to be consistent with what we've told them to date.
Okay, any questions on that outreach? Then let's move on to the flow easement study.
Yeah, real briefly on the flow easement study, the Finance Committee does have in front of it this afternoon a task order with Crown appraisers to start the phase 2 flow easement study. There's roughly 500 parcels of tillable land that are included in that flow easement valuation study. Crown has been pretty good to work with over the last month or two as we sorted out a lot of the details on that. And I think they're ready to get moving on that study now. So look forward to Finance Committee approval and ultimately board approval on that effort. Just for this group's awareness, Crown anticipates that effort taking most of a year. They expect to be done with valuing those flow easements by October of 2021.
So do we have any indication of where those values are going to lie? I mean, that would be my question if I had to sit there and wait for another year.
Yep.
I'd want to know, what's the value on, how does it impact me and my land?
Yeah, great question, Commissioner Sherling. So we did have Crown do both a phase 1 and then a phase 1B update of their study. And that analysis concluded, based on market data, that these flow easements would range between 15 and 35% of farmland values. And so if farmland is, say, $5,000 an acre, generally speaking, 20% of that would be about $1,000 an acre for the easement. And so that gives you a ballpark number. And of course, there's going to be nuances. Some land is going to be worth more and some maybe a little bit less. So hopefully that.
Great. I think that's helpful. What's the response been?
We have negotiated voluntarily a handful of flow easements over the last, year or so. And I think when we're able to sit down and, share the details and the facts with the landowners, it seems to me that they're receptive to these type of values. But I don't have any false illusions either. There's going to be a lot of challenges ahead of us as well. So
are you going to have to go through the same process that you did with the purchases? I mean, it should be much simpler.
We are planning to follow a regular eminent domain process if need be, not a quick take process. And the reasoning for that is, frankly, we have more time, and so we don't need quick take. And so I know we've been advised strongly that if you don't need to use quick take, don't use quick take. So we're planning to follow a normal, regular eminent domain process if need be.
Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions? All right, then let's move on to the 2021 farmland leases.
Yeah, again, just kind of wanted the group to be aware. I think Roger mentioned this. Pipers is out right now meeting with all of our former tenants, asking them to sign up for leases for 2021. The direction that the joint board has given and we've passed along is to first contact the former tenant, try to work out an arrangement with them. The farmland leases for 2021 are a little bit unique because we anticipate the P3 developer starting construction late next year. And so we are advising that the producers who are going to be farming in the area of the channel, we're advising them to plant small grains such that the small grains can be harvested before construction starts later next year. And so with that, we're anticipating that the rental revenue will be decreased. Most producers around the area don't willingly plant small grains. They do it for soil health and crop rotation purposes, among other things. And so we've been advised that we'll likely, as a result of this, we'll likely have some decreased rent. But keep in mind, if we didn't do this arrangement, we would likely have crop damage issues on the back end next fall. And then we may have weed control issues if we don't find somebody to plant this land. And so wanted the group to be aware of those situations.
And approximately how much land do we have that we're leasing out? Do you know off the top of your head?
I would guess we're probably in the, 8,000 to 9,000 acre range.
Okay, very good. All right, then let's talk about our meeting dates.
Yeah, let me show this agenda just so everybody sees that. Tammy, are you going to? Great. So this meeting calendar is consistent with what we have done the past several years. This meeting calendar is being presented for all of the committees and boards this week. I guess anticipating that the group is comfortable continuing on the same cadence we have been on. So wanted to share with the group and see if there's any feedback.
Well, one question I would have is at what point do we cut back to quarterly meetings or every other month? I know that it's, we're going to be acquiring property rights for many years, at least with the leases. It'll take longer. But once we get our policies in place, I would think that our meeting frequency could change. How do you anticipate this?
I think that's a fair question, and I know there's been some debate about, will we need more frequent or less frequent meetings? I guess I would just suggest that this year, for example, I think there were a couple months when we said, there's really nothing pressing. Let's not meet for the sake of meeting. And so we were encouraged to cancel a certain meeting. I guess I'm anticipating for the land committee anyway that we would follow that same practice, but I guess I work at your disposal. So let me know if you have other
I anticipate that we probably will be meeting most of those months this year. But again, this committee's been very loud and clear to me that if we don't have business, we shouldn't be meeting. So that will be my promise with this meeting calendar. Anybody else have any comments or questions on it? Okay, then let's move on to the joint board update.
Yeah, committee members, things are going okay at the joint board. Certainly, our land agents are working hard, and the negotiations are getting more difficult. And I think you understand that as more show up at the Cass County Commission meetings. I think 21 landowners are invited to this meeting tomorrow morning. Usually we don't get everybody to show up, but we might get 2, 3, or 4 to discuss their particular situation and why they feel, or they want the board to know how they feel about the valuation that was put on their land and why they figure that that isn't maybe right. So we listen to that and pass it on to the land agents to continue to negotiate. So yeah, we're moving forward, and no issues at this time. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roger, and your team. I know it's a difficult task. Any questions for Roger? Then we'll move on to the Minnesota group. What have you got to report? Anything?
Mary, we meet tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. I ask you that every month. Okay.
Unless Eric has something that he wants to present today, but it's, yeah, we will be meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Okay. And I guess I would just ask, I mean, do you have much on your agenda tomorrow?
Go ahead, Eric.
Sorry, Kevin, I can just take that for you. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we do have a couple contracting actions to hire different appraisers in front of the MIC board, excuse me, and in front of the joint board. And so those are, key steps. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of action right now on the Minnesota side. We are providing some updates on the appraisal work going on for the Red River control structure. We have had some Minnesota property owners reach out recently that I'll share an update with the board. So we're making good progress, but it's not into the fat fryer yet.
Okay, great. Item number 13 is MetroCog. Do they have anything today?
I don't see Adam online, but maybe I'm missing him.
And I don't think that we had really visited about anything new with MetroCog, but appreciate them being available if we did have anything. Item 14, any other business? Well, 7, I see at least a couple of finance people are online already, and you'll notice that I got this meeting done on time. So thank you, everyone. Be safe, be well, and Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, happy holidays. Thank you. We're adjourned.